Well, thank you one and all for joining me again today. This is your host, ID Jester. Tigers on the Hunt is going to be released just in a couple days, so I wanted to do a tutorial video on this sequence of play. For your information, of course, this game, Tigers on the Hunt, is being developed by Silicon Soft Systems Incorporated, which happens to be just one individual who has taken upon himself to create this wonderful game for us to be able to play. So congratulations to him. Of course, this game is being published by Slytherin and Matrix Games, so be sure to check out their websites to find out all the information you can about Tigers on the Hunt. So, of course, Tigers on the Hunt is a tactical World War II infantry combat system, which is, of course, strongly inspired by the old Advanced Squad Leader board game rules. If you are familiar with ASL, you should have no problem picking up this game and understanding the sequence of play. If you are unfamiliar with that, I'm hoping to show you guys the actual sequence of play so that you can get in and play this game without much trouble whatsoever. I realize it might seem rather complex in the beginning, but understand after a few turns of play, you will quickly understand what you can do and what is expected during each of these different segments. And after you play a few practice rounds, of course, you will be able to pick up this system rather quickly and easily. So the first thing that happens is the attacker is player B and player A is the defender. Now what I've done is color code this, so anything that happens with the attacker is going to be highlighted in green. Anything that happens with the defender will be highlighted in blue. And if both the attacker and the defender use that different segment, then it'll be highlighted in red. So at the beginning of the game, after you complete all of your pre-game setups and all the units are on the map, then we are going to start right in at segment number 1, which is the administrative segment. Notice it is in red, which means both the attacker and the defender will participate in this segment. Both players are going to complete this phase, and the attacker does all of his parts first, and then the defender will do all of his parts. Things you're going to do in this segment are rally units that are broken, remove the B+ counters that are on them. You're going to fix broken weapons, or try to. You're going to try to pick up weapons on the ground, and of course you're going to roll for your command and control. Once the attacker has completed all of his phases, or all of his parts of the segment, then the defender will do the same thing. Once that segment is done, we will go to the fire segment. Notice this is highlighted in green, which means only the attacker will do anything during this segment. And you can see the attacker only is going to choose units to fire. Those units that fire will not be able to move during the movement phase. The advantage, of course, with choosing to use your fire with your units in the fire segment phase is they are going to fire at full firepower, and that your rate of weapon fires can keep their rate of fire. Once you have completed the fire segment as the attacker, then we move on to the movement segment. Now, movement is only going to be done by the attacker, but notice it's highlighted in red, and that's because both sides are going to participate. While the attacker is moving his units, the defender can then fire. So the attacker is going to move his units. Only units that did not fire can move. So if they fired in the fire segment, they will not be able to move. While the attacker is moving his units, the defender can then opportunity fire at his moving units, and the defender can shoot at moving targets. Defensive attacks get a bonus to their attack against units that are in the open or units that are not assault moving. The first time you defensive fire with a unit, it will get its full firepower, and it will also get a first fire marker. Notice that one of the important rules is rate of fire weapons that keep the rate do not get this marker. So a light machine gun or medium machine gun or whatever happens, if it keeps its rate of fire, do not get the first fire marker. The second time a unit fires, so it already has a first fire marker, the second time it fires, it's going to fire at half its firepower, and it's going to get another marker, and this is going to be the final fire marker. So you basically have two opportunities with each of your units. First time you fire it, it's going to be at full firepower. Second time you fire it, it's going to be at half firepower. There is one other exception to this where you will get to fire one more time if an enemy unit moves adjacent to your units. This fire attack will also make a morale check on any unit that decides to final protective fire. So it's kind of a risky maneuver, but it's kind of a last stab as enemy units move adjacent to you. You can choose whether or not to actually final protective fire, which of course will do a morale check on all of your units and see if they break under the stress of having these units getting so close to them. So this all happens during the movement segment. Once we complete, the attacker has finished all of his moves, we will move on to the defensive fire segment. And notice this is highlighted in blue, which means only the defender will get to do it. Only units that did not get a first fire marker or a final fire marker in the movement segment may shoot. So if they have either one of those counters, they cannot shoot in this phase, and weapons can keep the rate of fire in the defensive fire segment. So basically, once the attacker has finished all of his moves, those units that didn't previously shoot can now have an opportunity to shoot. Once you have finished your defensive fire segment, we're going to move on to the advanced fire segment. So the attacker, this is just an attacker because it's highlighted in green. Attacker units that moved in the in the movement segment may fire. Attacks are made at half firepower, so that's the penalty for moving, is the fact that your firepower is restricted. There is an exception, of course, to this, unless the unit is marked with a plus symbol on the counter. A plus symbol represents the fact that they will fire at slightly more firepower than half. Slightly more. A little bit of a bonus there. They're not quite restricted to half firepower. Notice there's some other important restrictions on advanced fire. Your medium machine guns and your heavy machine guns cannot fire at all. None of your weapons will keep any rate of fire. And your two-hit weapons, like your AFV and your ordnance, have a penalty on any two-hit chance because they have previously moved during the turn. So this is once you move your units, as you're moving them up, the defender gets a chance to shoot at them and try to damage them. Once they're firmly in position, then they have an opportunity afterwards to fire back. That's the advanced fire segment. But of course, that fire back is extremely limited because they spent half of their time moving. They don't have as much time to put as much firepower out, and just being winded and stressed from moving from one location to another causes them not to have quite as good opportunity to damage the enemies as normal. Once we've finished all the firing in the advanced fire segment, we then go on to the rout segment. Notice this is highlighted in red, which means both sides are going to be performing this. Only units that are broken may rout. So it's only broken units. So all those units that have taken fire and have become broken, either in the defensive fire or the advanced fire segment or the fire segment, those units that become broken may now rout. And that also means move away. Units with a B+ that are adjacent to enemy units or are in clear terrain and in line of sight of enemies must rout. So units that are broken may rout, but units with a B plus that are adjacent to enemies or in clear terrain and in line of sight of enemies must route. When you're routing units, cannot move closer to known enemy units. Units that route into clear terrain in line of sight of enemies can be interdicted unless they low crawl, which means if you run out of a building and you run into the open area, the enemies still can see you, they can shoot at you and interdict you and try to do more damage to you. Of course, the way to prevent this is to low crawl, and when you choose to low crawl, you only move into an adjacent hex only. Of course, you must still follow the rule where you cannot move closer to known enemy units. Failing to route B plus units causes them to be eliminated. So if you can surround an enemy and break them and they have nowhere to route to get away from you, they will be eliminated and captured by your units. The attacker is going to route all of his units first, all of his broken units that he wants to route. He will move them all first. Once he has completed all of his routes, then the defender will route all of his units that he wants to route. Once we've finished the route segment, the attacker and only attacker can then use the the advanced segment. In the advanced segment, the attacker can move all personnel units one hex and can move into enemy hexes. Notice it's personnel units, so you can't move anything other than personnel units. They can move one hex and they can move into enemy hexes. While moving into an enemy hex, an ambush might occur if that hex happens to be a woods, a building, or a rubble hex. And if an ambush actually happens, then that side will get a bonus during the close combat segment. So the attacker can advance all of his personnel units one hex, can move into enemy spaces, and ambushes may or may not occur if they move into a hex where an enemy unit is. Then we go to phase 8. Segment 8, which is the close combat segment. All hexes with a melee marker get resolved first. So a melee marker basically represents a close combat that has happened and is keep happening. So it will get resolved first, and then all hexes with a close combat marker, so those that happen during this turn, will then get resolved. After close combat is resolved, if there are still units from both sides in the hex, then they will get a melee marker, which means the next time the close combat phase happens, those would get resolved first. And then, of course, segment number 9, which is the end of the turn switch. So the attacker becomes the defender then becomes the attacker, and you're going to repeat steps 1 through 9. And when you finish that, one game turn is finally over. So think of it as American baseball, where one side's on the field and the defender, and the other side's the attacker as the batters. And once they get 3 strikes or 3 outs, then they switch and the other sides come out and they're on the field being the defender, and the other team becomes the attackers at that point. So hopefully that gives you a good representation. And once both sides have had a chance to become the attacker and defender, then one game turn is over. So hopefully this gives you a good breakdown of how things proceed during a round in Tigers on the Hunt. It's really not as complex as it looks. Basically, you're going to choose units to fire. Those units that fire won't move. Then you're going to move your units, and as you're moving them, the defender can shoot at them. And when you're done moving all your units, those units that didn't fire can now fire for the defender. And then once he gets all his defensive fire done, then you can finish firing with all your units that moved. And then all those units that become broke can now move away and then the attacker can move his units one more space and try to cause melee, try to move into hexes with other enemy units, kind of fight them mano a mano, with close combat weapons. And then, of course, you resolve the close combat, and then you switch. And so it's not as complex as it seems. Of course, there's a lot of little fine details in the rules that you'll find as you play the game, but it's very intuitive, very easy to understand, and hopefully with this help of this video, a lot of the other tutorial videos that you can get on the Matrix Games and Slytherin websites, and of course the tutorials done by the developer. Be sure to look for all of those videos on YouTube, the Matrix Game YouTube site, and of course Slytherin. And of course, look on their fine folks' website to get all the information on Tigers on the Hunt. So hopefully this video has been a big help to you guys, and we'll see you soon.